looked for time management hacks for your ADHD homeschool learners, you probably have seen 3 things mentioned fairly regularly. That would be timers, visual schedules, and gamification. But practically, how do I actually use this in my homeschool? And what are some tips and tricks that can make these time management tips even more effective, or things that you should avoid with these 3 things? Well, today we're gonna dive into all that you need to know about these 3 amazing time management hacks. So let's get started. First up, timers. We know that timers can help our kids and ourselves with ADHD because it creates a sense of urgency. If you remember from previous videos, we have talked about the fact that those with ADHD tend to respond best or be motivated best by things that are really important to them, really interesting to them, or very urgent. This creates this sense of urgency, and when used properly, it can be a helpful motivational tool in your homeschool. We've used a lot of different timers over the years, but this one is my current favorite. It is very budget friendly, unlike some of the other visual timers that I have tried in the past, and it's so easy to use. You simply click on the button, you hold it down, and then you just twist it to set it for however long you want. You can set the timer up to an hour or as little as much as you want. So here I want to set a timer for 20 minutes. I slide the knob till I get to the time I want, press it down, and now it starts counting down not only visually, but with an actual countdown calendar. Not to mention the fact it keeps track of the time. Very multifunctional. But Katie, how do I actually use these timers in my homeschool? Well, I'm glad you guys asked. So it depends on the kid and the situation. But the first thing you can use it for is in your actual lessons. You can time your lessons for your students and let them know that the lesson is going to last X amount of time. So for instance, in our homeschool, 20 minutes of reading is what is required for our reading lessons. I set the timer for 20 minutes, we do the lesson, and we stop when the timer stops, even if we're in the middle of a sentence. This gives my kids a sense of accomplishment. They know when the ending is coming, and they are excited to get into their lessons because they know it's not gonna drag on forever. Some of my kids respond really well to playing beat the clock with their visual timer. So the way this works is we will start a subject, and at the beginning, I will ask them, hey, how long do you think this will take? Or how long do you think you could do this for? And they'll say, I think I can do it in 8 minutes, or I think I can do it in 15 minutes. So I'll set the visual timer for that and we'll start it. And then they'll go in and they'll do their schoolwork as fast as they can. This has been really, really helpful for my kids on staying focused on a task, and they're racing against themselves in a good competitive nature. It keeps them from drifting off focus. And when they do start to, I'm like, oh, how much time do you have left? And they'll look. Now, for some of my kids, this would actually be a high anxiety game and would not be motivational. So again, gauge it by your specific child. But if you've got one that's constantly needing redirecting, this might be a good game to try. It also is a game that helps your kids understand how much time things actually take. Some of my kids were feeling like their math lessons were taking them 2 hours to get done. But in reality, when we timed it, they were only taking 30 or 45 minutes depending on their age. So it can be a helpful tool in that and helping your kids to understand time better. Another tip that we use with these timers is when my kids are starting to build independence, there can be a tendency towards being completely dependent on mom. So you're like, okay, I want you to work on this handwriting here or on this math sheet, and then I'll be back. And they're like, but mom, I need you for this. Mom, I need you for that. So what I've started doing with my kids, and I recommended for a long time, is to set a visual timer for your children and set it for 5 minutes, just when you're starting out for the first time with them doing independent activities. Set a timer for 5 minutes and say, I want you to work on this for 5 minutes. And when this timer goes off, I'll come back and check in and see if you need any help. And then you build up that time more and more over the days and the weeks to the point where they can work on an independent activity in completion with or without the timer. If your child finds the fact of having the timer helpful, but finds watching the timer to be overwhelming or stressful, it's very simple. Sometimes I will set the timers and then place them in the kitchen or place them at the end of the table away from that specific child. I actually have one non-ADHDer and slightly busybody who loves to keep track of everyone's timers, so she lines up everyone's timers in front of her, and so she can kind of compete against their time too. I don't know whether that's wise or not, but that's just how it sometimes happens in our house. Another helpful hack when it comes to using timers is to use them for how long until the next break. So we're gonna work on this item for the next 30 minutes, but then we can have break time. Or if you know that snack time is at 2 o'clock, you can easily keep track of it on this with this timer. That being said, you can also do this when it comes to breaks and saying, hey, this is how long until our next break. Maybe they're having a hard time with their school subjects. Being able to set that timer and saying, great, if we can work for another 15 minutes really hard, then we can take a break. That's something that helps to motivate my kids as well. It's not that everything in their school day is going to be timed. This is really important or it will start to lose its effect. So pick and choose which subjects or which time periods are most helpful. And it might vary day to day or child to child. You can also use it for how long your breaks are going to be. So for my kids, I will say, all right, if you complete this math lesson or this math sheet, you can have a 5-minute break to work on IXL on your tablet, or maybe to play with Play-Doh or something like that. So being able to set those timers for how long the break is too keeps you from having to be the nagging person or them constantly asking how long, or more than likely them hoping you'll forget they're on break and they take an extra long break. So timers can be really helpful when it comes to that. I'll leave a link down in the description with these timers. They are fantastic and very, very, very affordable, easy to use, and they come in multiple colors. So I actually have 2 different colors so that I can be using them for 2 different kids at all time and not have to keep track of which one belongs to who. Our second tool that a lot of people like to recommend is checklists and visual schedules. I am a huge proponent of this, but not all things are created equal, and there are some tips you need to know about this important tool. Otherwise, it won't be nearly as effective. Remember how I said ADHDers need things that are interesting to them? That means they typically are going to need a variety of different visual tools or checklists, and oftentimes they're going to need those rotated. I see time after time where parents will say, I started out with the checklist at the beginning of the year, and my child was doing really well, and now it's December, and they won't touch it. Or it's lost its effectiveness and now they feel like they've done something wrong. It is not the case that you've done something wrong. It just means you need to change up your mode or method or means when it comes to checklists. The checklists themselves are still helpful, but they've become uninteresting. So now we need to mix it up. Here are some ways you can do that. Offering menus for your kids instead of direct checklists can be a really helpful thing. You can have a menu of different break items that they can choose to do. Maybe it's coloring, reading a book, doing some jumping jacks, doing a puzzle, whatever it might be. And then you can give them options so that they can choose what they're going to do when they get to that break. I actually have one of these break menus available in my Etsy store that I'll leave down in the links below, but you can make your own. Or you can even do this with school subjects and say, hey, here's all the school subjects that you have to complete today. Pick which one you want to do first, or you can rearrange the order. That's a way of making it more interesting and engaging to them. But it can even be more simple than that. It can be just a typed up or a handwritten checklist. The one thing I will say with most ADHDers is they need the ability to have an action alongside this checklist. So that means they need to be able to physically check it off, cross it off, move the piece. They need the ability to maybe check a digital box or even be able to cover the item. Some menus will have a foldable flap that you can fold over it. These are things that are really helpful for your child because there's an action and therefore a dopamine hit that comes along with completing that item. I made this mistake when I made our cleaning checklist for our different rooms in our house, and I was just like, hey, follow the checklist. They couldn't keep track of where they were at, and they oftentimes lost motivation or missed different steps on the checklist. But once I put those in a sleeve protector so that with a dry erase marker they could come along and check each box every day, they were golden. Some of our other unique checklist options is we have used chore packs or chore bands to help us keep on track. You don't have to limit these to chores, they could be for homeschooling too, but having these bands that you can have on your arm, each one with a little card tag. They're designed to label your keys, but instead I would put in there what the task was they needed to complete. They would carry these around on their arm and do their morning list, and as they finished it, they would return it to the little key ring or key garage. With this, my daughter was very motivated because not only did she not have to remember what all she had to do because she was literally carrying it on her arm, but I could visually see across the room whether she was completed her morning checklist or not and could give her those reminders. We also have found digital checklists to be really helpful. If you want a totally free app that you can do this with, you can use either Keep Notes, Google Keep Notes, or Google Tasks. Both of these are free options where you can create checklists. Google Tasks are nice because you can set them reoccurring and you don't have to manually set them every single time. Google Keeps is nice because you can color code the different lists. We use our Cozy Log calendar and we have checklists on there for all the things the kids need to do each day, and they love being able to go in and visually see what they've got going on and what they can check off. But that's a completely free app. There are lots of other paid apps that you can track chores, homeschooling tasks, and whatnot that can also be helpful. One of our favorite for homeschooling for my older three is Homeschool Panda, and I've done a video more all about that you can check down in the description below. But what about gamifying? Lots of people talk about the fact that one of the ways to make something important to your child is to give it a game, a reward, some aspect of a challenge. And this is just as true with homeschooling as it is with anything. We just need to be very intentional in how we do this. So what does this look like? Gamify routines, things that your children need to get in the habit of doing but maybe aren't currently doing. You can do this by creating a challenge. So our family loves to create challenges. Sometimes it will be a family challenge that we're all working towards that month. It might be something like, hey, we're gonna make sure that we leave the kitchen completely clean before we go to bed because we need to work on that. Or maybe it is something in our homeschool like, hey, we're gonna do our best to make sure we do our morning menu time every morning, even when things get a little chaotic. It could also be personal challenges that's individualized to each person. So currently right now, we are doing our own version of 75 Hard. If you've heard of the program 75 Hard, the idea is to challenge yourself. It has a huge list of things that you do for 75 days straight. And if you fail on one day, you have to start all over again. We're not doing that one. I have done that one, but we're not doing that one right now. We're doing our own version. So several of the kids wanted to do this, mostly my ADHD kids, and they have selected 3 to 5 things that they're focusing on that they're doing every single day, and they're challenging themselves to do that. Again, with some kids, this can be discouraging and not a good idea. With one of my ADHD kiddos, we are not doing this. But with some of my other ones, this is very motivating to them and a challenge that they go in and they check off their list every single day to make sure they get it done. You can also do this with their school subjects. Maybe have it where if they complete all of their schoolwork by the end of the week, then they're going to be given 15 extra minutes of gaming time if they get it done without you having to remind them. Or maybe it's rewarding their work ethic or lack of complaining or whining. It can be anything that you want to do, but the idea is to give some kind of challenge, a clear expectation and realistic challenge, having some way to track it, and then having some kind of reward. Again, you can use a lot of those apps I mentioned before for tracking. You can print off a little sticker chart and have them check off the different days that they complete things. And then as far as rewards go, I would highly encourage you to involve them in creating the rewards. Now, this does not mean whatever they put on the list is going to happen, but getting to see what things motivate your children can be really helpful, and it might actually surprise you. Sometimes my kids have enjoyed rewards like earning money for certain things, but oftentimes what they choose when they actually get the option is things like being able to pick what's for dinner for the night or having a little extra screen time on the weekend. Maybe it's getting to stay up past bedtime or forego one of their subjects, like not having to do math for the day. It could be things like getting to do a trip to the park or going to the Dollar Tree to pick out an item. Whatever it is, encourage your kids to get involved in the process, because if it's important to them and they're excited about the reward, they're going to be more likely to do the challenge. Rotate through and don't make your challenges too long. I actually wouldn't recommend starting with 75 anything because that's a long time, but only because we've built ourselves up to this point is it something that we can feasibly do in this season. And honestly, gamifying isn't all about rewards. It can also be just about incorporating more fun. Having dance parties, having an immediate feedback for your ADHDer is really helpful. So, okay, let's do 4 more problems and then we're gonna have a dance party for one song. Okay, let's do this one thing and then we're gonna go outside and run around for a little while. Whatever it might be. So it's that whole idea of we're going to do the hard thing and then we're going to have some kind of reward. You want to make sure that there's a lot of variety in those rewards, because that's what makes it more realistic. Because as adults, we can't say, all right, I'm going to do the hard thing and make dinner and now I'm going to buy myself a new car. Like, that's not a realistic reward and that's not something that's sustainable. So we don't always want to make them these huge rewards. We want them to match the effort, and we want to make them things that you can implement without having to have a lot of extra finances or extra resources. These tools will help you to get your ADHD kid encouraged and excited about their school and to help keep them focused. But it does not mean that there won't be days where there will be hard moments. It does not mean there won't be days where there are challenges. And if you're looking for more tips on how to deal with some of those, be sure to check out this playlist here of several of my videos all about homeschooling kids with ADHD.